and we have quite the show for you. Many of you already who are going to watch this already know what our subject matter is going to be for today. But before we talk about the tape, let's talk about the badge. Because when an ordinary citizen gets caught in a private scandal, that's gossip, right? But when the sitting sheriff of a county is allegedly connected to a sex tape involving someone tied to his agency, that is no longer just a personal matter. That becomes a question of power, a question of judgment, a question of whether the same office responsible for discipline, integrity, jail operations, employee conduct, and public trust can investigate itself with clean hands. So Clayton County right now has already been dealing with serious questions about leadership and jail operations. Now this alleged video adds a new problem. Not just what happened on camera, but what may have been happening behind the scenes all along. Was this a private embarrassment? Was this a workplace misconduct issue? Was this favoritism? Was this misuse of authority? And most importantly, did the public only find out because a video leaked? So tonight on Hill of Justice, we're going to go ahead and talk about these things and what was played on the tape. We're not here to humiliate anybody. That's not our goal. We are here to ask the questions that law enforcement leadership hopes the public never asks, because the scandal is not just about sex. The scandal is about power. And if the sheriff's office cannot police its own, then the people of Clayton County have every right to ask, who's policing the sheriff? I have two definite individuals here. As you know, I have former Sheriff Victor Hill here, and I also have Chief Allen here. I'm going to let my brother do the honors and introduce Chief Allen.
Sure. I can't think of a better subject matter expert to have here for several reasons. Chief Allen was the chief of Jonesboro, which is the county seat in Clayton County. But first, let me just tell you briefly about his background. He has 42 years of law enforcement experience. He has a master's degree in criminal justice and public administration. He was the chief of not just of Jonesboro, but of Grantville Police Department. And also, he's an instructor for the Georgia Law Enforcement Command College. And of course, we could go on and on about certifications. Let me say this. He was chief of Jonesboro when I was sheriff. And I've never seen a chief that would pull out on a call before I would, or that was up late at night responding to calls and stuff like that. He's a frontline leader, to the point that when he wasn't chief and there was a major scandal at the sheriff's office where I had to let half my command staff go because they were stealing overtime, and I needed someone with some experience to come in, I asked him to come in and be on that command staff for a certain period of time. So he's not just a former law enforcement official in Clayton County. He's actually worked at the sheriff's office in a command capacity. And he's a resident of Clayton County, a taxpayer of Clayton County. So he has a whole lot of different perspectives. And, I guess what I really like about him is, even though he's a person I like and admire and I consider a friend, we don't always see eye and eye. I can remember one time we had a big disagreement when he was chief of police over how to handle the media in a shooting situation. And but here's the thing. After that disagreement, 2 or 3 nights later, I'm out on the call, and who's the first to pull up to make sure I'm okay? That man right there. Welcome, Chief Allen. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And oh, by the way, even if we had the disagreement, you still hired me at some point.
I did.
But thank you for that. And again, I have to echo what you and Jerome have said. I can't think of two better minds that have been in leadership roles in this county and have served and dedicated their lives to public service. You in the assembly and you when you were sheriff. And so I think we have a diverse background, and I want you to echo something we had mentioned earlier. I'm not coming on this platform because I agree with you on everything. I'm coming on this platform because what you have brought forward makes me sick to my stomach. It makes me angry as a taxpayer. And I believe in your cause. And yes, you are still my friend and will always be my friend, and you will always be my sheriff of Clayton County.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. Well, with that being said, there's a lot of background, and there's a lot of background I can fill in as a former sheriff, and I'm sure there's things you can too. But let's start out with you, Chief Allen, because we want to get your perspective. You ran two different law enforcement agencies. You've reviewed a lot of the things that we're getting ready to talk about.
Yes, I have.
I want to get a macro view of what you're thinking right now before we start to dig into some details and some background that I probably can fill in.
Okay. And just to provide a disclaimer, I have not done any independent research. The only information that I have been able to draw from is what you have presented in previous videos and what you have sent to me. So if they say bring the receipts, you got a ton of them, and I agree with it. And I'll just hit some high points, and then as we circle back, we can individually. But I was looking through the credit card expenses, and a couple of things that caught my eye, not only the amounts, but Netflix, Disney Max, Peloton. I mean, when I was at the sheriff's department, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had a gymnasium full of all kinds of exercise equipment up there. So why are you having to buy Peloton, and where is the Peloton? So we will get into that later. And then there were a couple of checks that really bothered me. One was for $28,750 to the shopper for mailing services. I have no idea. Maybe he's got a good explanation for that. And then I'm not even favoritism apart, but I was able to track what you were saying. I just don't know all the players like you do. So
Right.
what you brought out and what you exposed, there's definitely a problem there. And I told you earlier, when you have favoritism like that and you don't administer equal justice for everyone, there's a problem internally. There's certainly some criminal conduct there, I believe. I've done major internal investigations before where I had to look at criminal versus administrative. And once you find the criminal, you got to turn the GBI over. You got to turn it over to them. The issue you brought out about this Captain Ross, that in and of itself warrants a totally independent and lengthy internal investigation. I agree with you on that. And then one thing that I noticed, there was a letter dated October the 29th, 2025 from the ACLU. And I've never seen a reply or a response on behalf of the sheriff's department for that, but they really brought out and they really brought issues out that pertain to the welfare and custody of the inmates. And there are people in this county and probably this video that have loved ones. They're in there, they committed their crime, and so be it. But that does not mean they have to lose their dignity and their humanity. And then there's several other things we can get to, like the little photographer lady that's a private photographer for the sheriff's department, and she's got a take-home car and all kind of expenses. And putting all that aside, all that's just fodder, for the argument. But Landry Murgison in was it 2024?
25.
Some issues. He brought out some really good issues about the punching in and punching out at the sheriff's department. And there was one section, and I want to find my notes here because I wrote it down exactly how it was about people punching out. Yeah, he said there were several screens, but they are only auditing like one person from the sheriff's department. But one person entered the time, one person changed the time, and one person approved the time. That just screams theft of time. or you have an employee clocking in and not working. So a lot of that is what has me angry. And and if you want to get into the leadership and the management part of it, we can, because this is a destructive leader. This is a leader who is, uh, I think, I hope I can say this. I think he's narcissistic, and I think that he thinks more of himself, and the people that are clinging to him are only clinging to him because they're getting what they want right now. And once that goes away, they're not going to be in his fan club anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. So let me see if I can bring this around. There's so much going on. There's no way for us to cover it in one show. So basically, we've got overtime fraud, and I want to get back to that um, because we got a video we need to show about that. Um, Overtime fraud, invoice fraud. We got a campaign where 30 or 40 employees were campaigning instead of being at work, and they were paid as if they were at work, and some of them were actually paid overtime. We got like those checks you went over. It's interesting you brought up that check because that is really, I believe that's a campaign mail-in service, and I think that they found checks written to the campaign manager as well under another business. So, in a text message service, and of course, the sheriff's office has a text message service called Nixle. So that text message service is probably a campaign text message. So that means you're using county funds to campaign with. And of course, we got one of the most interesting nepotism things I've ever seen, where the entire family works here, where the mother has been hired, made a captain, the sister who's never been a cop before, hired, made a lieutenant, a guy who's never been a cop before that was a groomsman in a wedding, made a colonel, fourth in command, first cousin. You know, you get rid of the food contractor, bring in a food contractor, and the food contractor you bring in, ironically, your cousin is the manager of the kitchen, and he gets a county car, undercover car to take home. Uh, then we also got another issue of some extreme brutality that's been covered up. One, something that just got released today, and that's a whole nother story that we'll get to. So you got a whole web of corruption. And that's why when this is finally investigated, it's going to take, this is not just one of those things that you could just put anybody on it. It's a complex financial investigation, because when you look at all of the cars that were bought not through the procurement process, drop top Broncos, Lexus, whatever, and cars that undercover tags were applied for, but yet secretaries driving, clerks driving, we got a judge driving one, you got a private contractor driving one. This is a very, very complex investigation that's going to have to really come around. And I want to say that to say this. Everyone's talking about the sex tape, but and don't get me wrong, that's wrong. But I think we got to look at the deep issue. The deep
That's the
issue
least
is
of his worries.
that's the least of his worries, right? The deep issue is with an employee. It's with an employee that's one of the employees that was working on the campaign during county time. It's with an employee that allegedly, and I believe they can prove it because they proved everything else, that was on a cruise with family members while she and those family members are still being paid as if they're at work. Uh, so it ties into other things because you're talking about a person that's been, and that's another person that drives an undercover car, but is not in an undercover capacity. So you got to think about who that person is. It's not just some civilian that doesn't work there, but it's an actual employee. And it's an actual employee that if someone ever speaks to or investigates, they're going to find that it's kind of connected to the overtime scandal and the campaign scandal as well, too. So with that being said, I just want to kind of give the whole picture. But I think what's more incredible than anything, what's more incredible than a sex tape, what's more incredible than nepotism, overtime fraud, campaign fraud, invoice fraud. What's incredible is all of this information is out there. If a clairvoyant was able to raise Ray Charles up, he could clearly see what this is. But yet, no intervention from the DA, no intervention from the media. We haven't heard anything. I know the days of Dale Caldwell and all of them are obviously gone, but no one's heard anything from the investigative reporters out there. Nothing from Tom, Mark Wee, none of them. And then my brother's getting ready to play a video where I'm not the first to uncover this. You got the deputy county manager that presents the overtime fraud and the invoice fraud to the commissioners, and yet there's no vote for a forensic audit. Now, it doesn't just have to be an audit; it needs to be a forensic audit. When you see receipts from a Walmart in Alabama, I'm not even sure what you would be going to Walmart in Lovejoy for. It needs a forensic audit because we understand what exactly was bought. Because if it wasn't anything for the sheriff's office, if it's something that's female related or house decorating related, that's why you need a forensic audit. But what's incredible about this is, and maybe it's not, because his wife is a commissioner and she has two allies there, but they blocked the forensic audit, nothing from the media. And I can tell you right now, I don't know of too many places where a county manager can go before the commissioner and make that type of presentation and proof, and the DA hears about this and is not, hey, I want that right now. Get the subpoena. I need my investigators on there right now. So go ahead. Your sound went out. I'm sorry.
His sound went out.
His sound is out.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Okay. Can I introduce my 3 C's right here?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And first of all, I think it's total incompetence. And when you have the sheriff's department and the county commission and the district attorney's office all having different players in this thing, all the parties are complacent. So you have complacency. And then when you have complacency, you've definitely shown collusion. So you got complacency, collusion, which equals corruption. And that's the 3 C's.
I agree.
Because I can tell you now that at any time when I was chief of police, or I ran an investigative unit, or I ran the drug unit, when I worked undercover, no matter what the expense, you had a date, the amount, and what it was for. And sometimes you got called in the carpet and had to provide an in-depth explanation. But Sheriff, one thing you said earlier about the checks, and one thing that this just drives me insane as a person who managed his departmental budget well for 12 years. All the checks for these cars, and they totaled up, I think, to $679,000. Well, that's almost $500,000. But yet he went before the commission, and I forgot the date. He went before the commission on June the 5th of 2024 and said he had a $1.6 million shortfall in his budget. Well, there's your shortfall right there. There's where your shortfall went right there. And I think, like you said, I think Stevie Wonder and Helen Keller could figure this one out.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I don't even think that's everything, because even though the commissioners were finally able to get him to turn over, it's obvious there's a lot of financial stuff that hasn't been turned over yet. And that's why it's so important that somebody with the authority steps in. Someone like the DA could subpoena and force him to turn over everything and look at it, or some other authorities. But it's obvious that everything is not there, because even when you see those checks written there, it doesn't cover some of the other vehicles like Dark Horses, Mustangs, which is limited editions. What was that bought for and why? You know what I'm saying? And you don't even see that on that check. So we're talking probably far more than $600,000 in vehicles. And a lot of these vehicles were bought for civilians to drive. and then they applied for undercover tags, which brings in another issue of making false statement, because you have to fill out a form saying that this car is
Yes,
going to be used for undercover
you do.
purposes. So when you give it to a secretary, when you give it to a clerk, when you give it to a judge, which we still don't have an explanation for that, you're talking about a false statement right there. I want everyone watching to get a sample of what the county manager presented to the commission actually a year ago, because this was May of 2025. So it's amazing how this has gone this long and nothing from the DA, nothing from the media. And to the GBI's credit, I think a lot of people got to understand this. There's some weird laws in Georgia. The GBI can only come in if they're called in by the police chief, the superior court judge, or the sheriff. Well, we know the sheriff is not going to call the GBI and say, look, I'm a criminal, come investigate me. So it's a very unique circumstance that they could be called in. So I don't think the GBI is ignoring it. Their hands are tied. And hopefully our future leaders will untie their hands with some type of legislation that will give them the authority that when they get information like this, they can act without having to wait for some type of political request. So it's real important. But I want y'all to get an example of is if you look on my Facebook page, the link to both of these meetings where the former deputy county manager brought this before the commission is there, so you can see the whole thing. But I want you to get a sample of some of the things that he was giving them that's clearly criminal. I think we got a little 2-minute excerpt. If Jerome, if you could play that.
So one of the things that finance did and does, and internal audit started looking at, was going through these invoices to see.
Jerome,
exactly
stop 1 second. I can't see the video. There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Finance did and does, and internal audit started looking at, was going through these invoices to see exactly what are we paying, and to make sure that what we're being asked to pay is the service that's being provided. So the two that we highlighted are just two that stood out to us. So one of them is 804 prisoner and U.S. corrections. So what's on your screen now is an invoice from U.S. corrections. So these are for prisoner transports. And you can kind of see here that it has passenger name, passenger ID, tells you where they came from, where they went to, how many miles it was, what they're billing us to transport this particular inmate. And they provide an invoice per inmate. To your right is kind of a similar, this was actually a female prisoner. And you can kind of see the name, of course, is blocked out, but all the other pertinent information that tells the county what we're paying, why we're paying it, and then gives us a mechanism to track this particular inmate. When we look at the other line item, I think it was roughly about $290,000 that's outstanding in bills. These are the invoices for those. So if you look at prisoner transports for the month of April, it just simply says prisoner transport, tells you what they're doing, transporting of prisoners with foreign warrants, production orders, arrest orders, court orders, and you see the rest of it labeled there. Quantity of 200 at $350 for a $70,000 invoice. But we don't know who those 200 people are, or where they went, or where they came from, or how to verify that they were actually transported.
All right, let me give you a little background on that. Okay, so let me tell you what's bizarre about that. The sheriff's office, for as long as I've been around Clayton County, had a transportation unit. And their job was to pick up people for transportation. Meaning, let's say you get locked up in Henry County, but we have a warrant for you in Clayton. Well, transportation would go to Henry County and bring you here. They go to Fulton. They go anywhere in the state. And they also will do the transport when it's time for someone to be sentenced to prison. They'll make sure they get there as well too. So they do all the local transport. They usually work within a certain frame period, and maybe every now and then, if they get caught up in a traffic jam or something like that, there might be 2 or 3 hours overtime if that's the case. But usually they get the job done within that 8-hour period. So now you got this company that comes in and they're doing local transport. So now that's taken away from the deputies. Well, if you want to say, well, we need to free up the deputies to do something, I don't know what you freed them up to do when you got 8 people dead in the jail and drugs being sold in the jail or whatever like that. So this company comes in, and he just talked about one invoice. Altogether, they charged about $1 million, from what I'm told, just to do these local transports when deputies were doing it. And interestingly enough, this transport company is owned by someone that's a former employee at the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. So it makes you it let me just put it this way. I don't think this is a hard investigation. I think it's a detailed investigation whenever someone steps in and finally does it. It needs to be someone that understands financial crimes. But this is not hard. If regular citizens can do an open records request and come up with this stuff and send it to me, I'm sure that whoever, whatever authority, we know it can't be we know well, it's not going to be the DA, and there's probably reasons why. She has a friend that works at the DA's office now, and quite frankly, I don't think she's capable of investigating it anyway. What we saw with the AI stuff or whatever, that would be a botch investigation. But when somebody comes in, when finally somebody looks at this, it's almost, as attorneys refer to, a prima facie case that's just going to be handed to them. It's not that difficult. It's obvious corruption. And I think the question we need to ask now, let me tell you what I think we really need to ask you and get your expertise on. Okay, this is not about an election at this point. Okay, we know good and well he's not going to win re-election. That's not going to happen. And because his wife is involved in covering up the audit, because she has a driver from the sheriff's office that drives her around, because county employees was used to work on her employee, it's doubtful that she's going to survive re-election too. So that's not the issue, because guess what? They're not up for election for another 2 years. And another reason we know that they're not going to survive election is because in order for them to win, they had to have 30 to 40 employees working on their campaign every day, all day, and they still barely won. So we know they're not going to survive re-election. The problem is there's 2 more years, 2.5 years actually, left on their term. How many more people at the Clayton County Jail are going to be murdered? How many more escapes? How much more drug trafficking in and out of the jail? How much more money misappropriated and stolen? How much can Clayton County survive between now and that election if no higher authority comes in and does something? And I think that's the real question to ask you. So, Chief Franklin, go ahead and take the floor, please.
Well, one of the things that you sent me that kind of really disturbed me was the one where the inmate had to call, or inmate's family had to call 911 to come help him. I don't know if Sheriff Allen, and I'm embarrassed to share the same last name, but I don't know if he's aware of his constitutional obligation to manage the penal system for the county, and that everyone that is incarcerated is in his care, and that is to prevent things from what has happened recently from ever happening. I know during your time as sheriff there, and when I was there, I got a good inside look at how things were done. I kind of knew from the outside looking in, but when I was there, we did not have inmate problems like this, like they're experiencing now. The drugs, the money, the gang rapes, the murders, the assaults. That kind of stuff didn't happen because you were constantly on us to do the shakedowns, do the shakedowns, do the shakedowns. And as we carried those out, we prevented a lot of things from happening. But Sheriff, what is just astonishing to me is, and I'm going to take you out of the picture for just a moment. Okay. I'm going to set you out because I know the haters and naysayers are going to say, well, he's just trying to retaliate. No, I call BS hockey puck on that. Okay. So I'm going to take you out of the equation, and I'm going to speak for a moment as a taxpayer and a legalese semi-expert on law enforcement. This is gross incompetence, right, at its best, at its finest. This man is in charge as the highest powered law enforcement officer in the county, and he is failing miserable. It seems like he wants to spend more time surrounding himself with Playboy bunnies, photographers, and extravaganza event. And here's one thing that really is a thorn in my craw. So the check, he paid 49,000 something dollars for the Porsche Center for some extravaganza. You mean to tell me there is not a venue in Clayton County owned by Clayton County or a city that he could not have used? You've got the Morrow Center at South Lake Mall. You've got the Fine Arts Center out in just outside of Morrow, and you've got I can't think of the other place, but you got several places that you didn't have to spend $50,000 on, but yet it's just like there's no consequence to his actions, so this behavior is going to continue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you what else is disturbing about that party at Porsche. I don't know if you noticed a check for D&K. There's one check for $10,000, and there's more money that was spent at D&K. But there's actually a witness that not only did he go get his tuxedo for the party, for that Porsche party, but members of his command staff and his security, they went and got tuxedos as well too.
Yeah,
Now,
let's talk about that.
I've never heard of an elected official not just spending money for an extravagant party, but also you got to buy him the tux for him and his security and his command staff to go there. That's crazy. And according to this witness, and see, that's why it's so important as a forensic audit, because that forensic audit can go and find out exactly what was bought at D&K, and it's going to show how many tuxedos, it's going to show this and that. But that's a very, very serious issue. Even when I was a detective, we had a clothing allowance, but it was just a $400 clothing allowance. I'm sure that's probably increased, right? And you get it once a year, and you can use it because you're plain clothes. But I have never seen an unlimited clothing allowance where you get to buy tuxedos, shoes, shirts. And this is a pretty reliable source. And I think if this thing is ever investigated and they talk to that particular person, that's a show in itself that you got the sheriff, and not just going to D&K now, but there's another check I don't know if you saw for tailored-made suits. And that was 30. Yeah. And I think it's a tailor-made shop called Reggie G's. So he spent another $30,000 for tailor-made suits for himself. So, I didn't get that memo. I didn't realize I could get tailor-made suits when I was sheriff. Maybe I missed something. You could tell me. I mean, you're the expert on that. Did I miss something and I could address that?
You didn't miss anything. You just respected the law. You respected the law. Now, I want to bring up something while you was mentioning about the suits and the checks going out. Is when I was chief for 7 years in the city of Jonesboro, I managed my budget, and every year I came under budget for every year. I had an overtime line in that budget. And of course, the city of Jonesboro's overtime budget was smaller than the sheriff's department budget, of course. But every month that I ran into overtime, I could look at the total time, tell you how much it was going to be spent, and then I could look at my line item and see, okay, I've got $100,000 here in overtime. This is 20,000. Okay, I got 80,000 left. And it really got to a point, Sheriff, when I was at Jonesboro, especially when we got toward the end of the financial year, that I would tell people, I said, look, we just got to let people, we can't work people because we ain't got no more overtime. And that's where the exempt people who are exempt, me and the lieutenants, we stepped in and filled those roles because I needed to work within my budget. But this joker just looks like he's got an open checkbook and just writes checks. And I can tell you now that if I'd have made a presentation to the city council requesting $500,000 for overtime, I'd have been run out on a rail.
Let me give you some background on this overtime. So I wish we had that video. We could show it, but it's on my Facebook page. And actually the whole meeting is there. The former deputy county manager, Landry Murkison, did an excellent job of showing the overtime fraud. He really did. And I was wishing that we could show that on there, but you can go to Facebook, and the commission meeting where he does this whole presentation is there. And let me also say this that we won't have time to go into. He exposed that overtime fraud. And as a result, he ended up having to leave. Think about it. He's exposing the overtime fraud of the sheriff, and his wife is a commissioner. And she has two allies that didn't want to see the audit. And from that moment on, they harassed the life out of him, and he just went ahead and took an early retirement. And that was a great loss to Clayton County. He was one of the most competent county managers we ever had. The other county managers, I mean, mostly was just appointed out of friendship. You got a guy, he's a nice guy, but he went from being park and recreation director to county manager.
Yeah,
so
that's the collusion part.
Exactly. The former chairman had a history of like a lot of people, hey, let's just bring in friends or whatever. You don't have to know what you're doing. Just be a friend. So we lose one of the most competent people we've ever had because of this, because he's exposing and doing what he's supposed to do when he sees something wrong. But let's talk about this overtime for a second. So I want to kind of explain to people, but he does a better job. You need to watch that. Okay, like let's take the colonel, for instance, that he brought in that was his groomsman. Okay, there is no colonel position here. You take the person, you put them in a position that's not a colonel, and you call it a colonel. Then you give what we refer to as padded overtime. So that means every day you get 6 hours of overtime that's just entered into a computer. You're not clocking in, you're not clocking out to get your salary to where it needs to be. And Murkison was able to find some interesting things. He was able to find folks whose base salary is $60,000, but they made $157,000 in a year. And a lot of these people that was on that list was friends and family. It was a lot of overtime for the mother, the sister, and folks like that. So it's very obvious. But let me give some background about overtime. And here's what I think the public don't know. And I think needs to, and it's connected to two things. When I was sheriff, there was an overtime fraud scandal that I found out about. And they had stolen $1.2 million in overtime. There was actually sergeants approving overtime for lieutenants. Can you imagine that? Or two sergeants approving each other's overtime. And the way the policy reads is there has to be a request from a supervisor because we need somebody to work, and they ask you to work overtime. And if you can't, then they have to make someone work overtime because it's a need. But we had a situation where a sergeant would tell another sergeant, hey, put me in the system for 4 hours. Hey, put me for 6 or whatever. So all of these people were investigated and had to leave. And I sent this case to the DA, who did absolutely nothing about it. Well, in some ways, your story and I intertwine with that. Because half my command staff was wiped out, a lot of people rose through the rank faster than they actually should have, because there was this huge gap. So, there's always been this thing out there that the guy who's a sheriff now, that he was raised through the ranks real fast because of some special. Actually, it was a fluke, because we had to get rid of so many commanders that allowed it or approved it. And unfortunately, I wish there was about 35 commanders out there like you that I could have brought in. So there was a lot of people I had to put in those positions. And at that point, I was still of the mindset that we could create leaders, and leaders can't be created. They're born. And that's another situation for another time.
And we talked about that.
And we talked about exactly
where we said you have to be able to work with what you have.
Exactly.
And sometimes you don't have the best, and you don't have the money. So what you got is what you got to work with. So we both struggled in that area.
Right. So
I got a question for you both.
Please go right ahead.
You guys are sounding like you're very hopeful that this is going to change. There has been no indication that this is going to change. What makes you guys so hopeful that this is the beginning?
Well, I not to, a famous quote is keep hope alive, correct?
Right.
But again, I think
Because
the
I have
real
another
quote.
thought about this.
I think the real quote of the day, and I forgot the guy's name. I put up on the page. The evil flourishes when good people do nothing. And I think it's important for people to know you don't need a gun and a badge to fight crime.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need a pen and a paper and a camera or a podcast or whatever. And there's something to be said about resilience and perseverance.
Mhm.
This is a crime against Clayton County. And let me say this because this is where I was getting ready to go anyway. One thing that I will always have to take in the chin is remember, I endorsed this guy to be sheriff. And this is something that I've apologized to Clayton County for 100 times and will apologize again. And the reason why is written in my book. I wrote about it. Okay. I think we all, no, not we all, but if you haven't read the book, it's clear in there. A case was brought against me by a political enemy, the DA, and her friend, and it was a plot to get him elected sheriff. And I didn't want to see them get that part of the plan. So when the guy who's a sheriff now came to me in tears, crying, saying, "Please help me," I wasn't inclined, but someone kind of said to me, "Well, that would at least stop them from getting this guy in." And of course, in retrospect, it wouldn't have been any better if he got in, but at least it wouldn't have been me that recommended this guy, because that
Right.
guy's probably more horrible than what we got now. But I owe it to Clayton County to make sure they're now the victims in this thing. The only victim was supposed to be me. This was supposed to be a plot by the DA and the former chairman, Jeff. Let's get him out so I can run for sheriff and win. And of course, that part didn't work. He never got to be sheriff. But unfortunately, I endorsed this guy. And the sad part about it is, that I think he was going to be some great super guy. Absolutely not. But I figured people could help him. I would help him or whatever. Never in my wildest dreams did I think this guy would hire his entire family and rob the county blind. But go ahead.
I think he gets more into trouble with this. I think he gets more into, of course, the criminal exposure because he's involved with this sex
But Jerome,
tape.
let me go back and answer your question that
Yeah.
you asked. Why do I think it's going to change now?
Yeah.
One, because of my faith in God. I think God watches over and he dishes out the right justice at the right time. May or may not be for me to do that. But one is my faith. And number two, I think it's going to change because we have a great man in Sheriff Hill who has devoted his time to bring this forward and to make notice of it. And more people are beginning to notice this. And more people are noticing their tax bills on their property taxes in Clayton County are increasing. Now you want to link that to something, link it to the overtime and the expenditures. While look, this is not my first rodeo and my first political trifle going on here. Okay. I've been in a few, but you link it back to, okay, well, we can't say the sheriff's department's all of it, but by golly, that is a lot of wasteful spending. We are out here, and I say we because I'm not in law enforcement right now. Sheriff Hill's not in law enforcement, but we are two tax-paying citizens of Clayton County, and we're struggling. I'm struggling to pay bills, put food on the table while I see people are dancing and partying in Porsche. They're driving a county car with county gas. And I think, Jerome, that the more people that learn about this, the angrier they're going to get. And they're finally going to push the commission to do something.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I think that what we're looking at, basically, there's nothing that brings everybody to the table than a good sex tape, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what we're looking at,
it's not a good sex tape, but go ahead.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. That's very true.
You know what? I'm sorry about that. Let's stay serious.
Breaking
Okay.
me. Yeah, I'm gonna try to stay serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here. Right. So you got the non-consensual recording. It could be a consensual recording, right? But then you got the distribution process. Who did that? Then you got the coercion, maybe a retaliation, misuse of office, or some type of prohibited power relationship, and that's what we're going at with right now. He, I know many of you just said, and I think the both of you said in the beginning of the show, hey, guess what? That's the least of his worries.
Yeah.
No, this is his worry big time because it puts him
Yeah.
dead smack into the center. There ain't nothing like a videotape with your bony butt going up and down doing this type of nonsense, and don't think that that's going to go ahead
Look,
and bring the horses to the barn.
look, I didn't mean to minimize that,
Mhm.
but you're absolutely right. That's a problem. But to me, having been in a position of leadership, having a sex tape put out on me probably would have been a good thing at that point if I'd done all this other stuff to distract from that.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know who distributed the tape, how it was recorded. Don't care. And the reason I say that it's the least of his worries, because the more important stuff to me is the checks, the nepotism, and the lack of leadership and accountability. And let me take it one more step, and let's take a step up. Okay. We've talked about the sheriff. Let's go talk about the Clayton County Commission. Let's find out why they're not doing it. We know why they're not doing it,
Right.
because Miss Alling is directing her minions to vote her way to suppress the audit. Okay.
You're right, but the only pushback I have is I know you don't care, but Georgia law cares.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
I
agree.
mean, a device to observe, photograph, or record another person's private activities without their consent. That's where it brings all this stuff up to play. And who did that? Why did they do that?
Right.
So people, now that this is out in the news media and it's out in the outlets, more so than actually the fraud that was going on in the jail, it has more teeth. It's more juicier. It's more sexier. And of course, things happen to get done because of that stuff.
And we also got to ask this question too. Is this young lady a victim? I mean, obviously she filmed
Right.
it. I mean, it's her Ring camera, is in her house. I don't know if they're camera experts or not, but they zoomed it up and saw a picture on the wall. So she's been positively identified. So it's not like someone was filming this. She filmed it.
Mhm.
And obviously for some reason she showed it to someone or put
That
it out or
doesn't mean she
whatever.
did. Somebody
Well-
else in that house could have too.
Right.
Well,
But-
it's true, but more than like, but what we got to ask is what is perhaps she's a victim. We don't know. Perhaps
Right.
something
Right,
was
I get what
done
you're
to
getting at.
her,
Right.
and
But
she
Jerome-
got tired of it, and she was like, you know what? We don't know.
Yeah, Jerome, let me put this kind of in perspective for you. You've seen the movies where the lawyer gets up and says, witness one, did you say or do this? Oh, strike that from the jury. Well,
Mhm.
you can strike it all you want, and you can question the legality of the recording and the distribution and all that. And I do agree with you that may prevent problems down the road, but the cat's out of the bag. That I saw what I saw. I know what I saw. I know who I saw on there. That's in my mind. So now if you come back and say, well, that recording was illegally obtained, didn't have anybody's permission, didn't have her permission, it was an enemy of Sheriff Allen, okay. But still, does that make it any less than what he did? But I do
Right.
respect your legal considerations for how it was obtained. And
Right.
here again, just like you said, was she a victim? But could she also be an accomplice? And now she's got dirt on him to blackmail him, maybe to get that Malibu.
Well, I do think that they can be mutually exclusive.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
you could have that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, let me say this. A lot of this has not been confirmed. Of course, there's a lot of stuff I've heard there, and I thought, no, that can't be true. And it was true. Like the paintings, for instance. I was like, nah, no one spent $15,000 to get cartoon paints of themselves, but the checks are there. Okay. But, there's a lot out there. And when this is investigated, there's a lot of crimes that I've investigated, and it started out as a rumor. Hey, they're selling drugs over there. You got proof? No, well, we go check it out. We watch, and sure enough, they're selling drugs. So that's how investigations start, with people tipping off. But, I've been getting a lot of messages lately, messages about, and some repeatedly, which makes me wonder about it, abortions, children being born by employees. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I'm being told. So let's use the word allege right now. But let's just say that is true. let's just say that this young lady is not the only person, but let's just say there is someone there that's bore a child by him, and their job is their child support. Let's just hypothetically, because we don't have DNA. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And let's just say somebody was driven to Alabama to have an abortion. Hypothetically, if that comes out, okay, I think, we're dealing with a very, very serious situation here because, this is a form of sexual, you could say, well, it's consensual or whatever. But again, it's kind of like, okay, teachers, people in custody, we all know that there are laws with that. They're like, okay, we don't care if the person is 18 years old. If you're a teacher, it causes a problem. A correctional officer, it doesn't matter if it's a grown woman, it's consent, she's in custody or whatever. So I guess what I'm getting to is this, we don't know the real story. First of all, we don't know if this stuff is true, but let's just say it is true. And let's just say that these women felt that they were in a predicament where they had to have sexual relations, where they had to have unprotected sexual relations, which obviously that goes on because we saw the video. And they ended up pregnant or whatever. And one had an abortion and one kept a child or whatever. That's a very creepy, and that could really turn, because if this stuff is proven and they tell their story, it might not be a story of, hey, it was just a guy I fell in love with and it just happened, which I doubt seriously if that's the case. That could be a huge sexual harassment, fraternization problem that is.
And
Why don't you talk on that? Why don't you talk on that?
I'm going to tell you what an old major, when I worked at Forest Park Police Department, told me one time, and I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to give you the G rated. He said, you don't get your booty and your paycheck in the same place. And that was in like 95. And that always stuck with me. And being in the position of chief of police, it's like being the sheriff of a small town. You've got, luxuries you can take advantage of. And I think what's important, Sheriff, is you got to know what you can do and what you can't do. Like, I'll never forget one time a lady, we ended up dismissing a ticket, long story short, dismissed ticket. And she wanted to give me a gift card to, somewhere. And I said, ma'am, I can't take money for that. I don't want that. But if you want to bring cookies or cupcakes and give them to the officers, I'm fine with that. But we can't take monetary endorsements. Now, the position that puts him in, and I understand all your allegations, and you're saying that it puts him in a very vulnerable position, because now he can be intimidated. He can be blackmailed to give me more overtime, give me a car with free gas.
Yes.
If you don't hire my cousin from Alabama and give them a good high paying job, I'm going to go public and I'm going to claim you paid for the board. I mean, there's 101 scenarios that this could go, and none of them look good for him.
I agree.
But you can't put yourself in a position of vulnerability. But yet every time I turn around and watch one of your podcasts, something new. And when is enough going to be enough? Why is the commission chairman for Clayton County, I think her name's Dr. Walker, right?
Dr. Anderson. And actually, she has requested a forensic audit, and she has voted for it. It's the wife and two other commissioners that are blocking it.
Well, why can't she call the director of the GBI and request an investigation? Because you got all this going through the formal red tape.
I'm glad you asked that. And that's the craziness that I did a post on. The GBI can only be requested by chief of police, the sheriff, or the Superior Court judge. It's a weird quirk in the law. Other than that, their hands are tied behind their back. They can sit there. I don't think they can sit there and watch in progress crime and don't do anything. I would hope not. But
well, let me give you a little twist on that.
Okay.
Of course, this is far fetched, but
Mhm.
the Clayton County Jail sits in the city of Jonesboro. It's the county seat of Clayton County. So any offenses like that or this collusion occurred in the city limits of Jonesboro, why don't we get the chief of Jonesboro to call?
Well, if Franklin Allen was still the chief, that wouldn't be a question. That takes somebody with balls and integrity. Now, I don't know who the chief of police is there now. I don't want to criticize. I have no idea who that is. Right. But it's going to take somebody with some balls and integrity to do that. And if you were still chief, I don't even think that would be a question. You'd be calling
No.
GBI tomorrow. Yeah.
I'm telling you, because here's where I would make my decision based on. Number one, there's nobody internally in the sheriff's department going to call the GBI in. And it's very clear you have to have an independent agency with this. Number two, it's very clear nobody in the district attorney's office is going to call the GBI in.
Mhm.
They've had multiple accounts, multiple complaints, nothing was done. And it is also now very clear that the commissioners, remember the complacency, the collusion, the corruption, and it follows that path. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I can sit here before you and your audience and tell you, had I been chief of police in Jonesboro right now, and I could determine venue, I would no doubt be on the phone with Chris Hosey as we speak.
No doubt. No doubt.
I know, guys. The biggest question becomes the criminal question. Is this? It's not simply because there's a sex tape out and it exists. We know it exists, right? The criminal question is how it was made, right? How it got out, whether everyone consented, and whether the power of the sheriff's office was involved. You ask any one of those questions, and you get something that's different or reverts from what it should be. Now you got a problem. But the $1 million question is, can this lead to the slippery slope?
Yeah.
And that is where we're at this juncture.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. But if we've got a second, I want to circle back around and hit something that you mentioned of, because in one of our offline conversations, you said this colonel guy is the fourth in line for command of the sheriff's department. So if the sheriff and the chief deputy and the other two are gone, he's in charge. And this gentleman has no law enforcement or management experience. I mean, I don't know who he is or his background.
Never been a cop a day in his life. Matter of fact, I don't know if you saw the post, but
where he had the
on his
marijuana
page,
cigarette.
he had a roach, and marijuana is what is, we call it a roach, I guess, at some point. But yeah, he's the fourth in command of the sheriff's office.
Yeah, and so the question now becomes, I think we're moving past. Well, we're well knee deep in criminal, but I think we're also moving back into what I said earlier about him being incompetent. That's incompetence. That's negligence, and retaining a sheriff that's going to run this much corruption that's erupting in there is negligent. That's negligent on the part of the county commission for allowing it to happen. It's on the part of the district attorney for not. I mean, at the least, she could do an investigation, but they're not, because they're all tied together. They're all one big happy family.
Exactly.
And like I said, now, when you and I were out there, you and I were one big happy family. We got along, but we also disagree. You wouldn't let me step over the boundary, and I wouldn't let you step over the boundary.
Exactly. Exactly.
We had our differences in private. We never argued or anything in front of our men or women. And we had our conversations and we worked our differences out professionally.
Exactly.
And now, but you don't have that with him. There's no, because all of the people that are involved in this thing are all connected. They're all in a big snake ball and then just wound up. And so somebody has got to do something about this.
And you're absolutely right. And I'll end with this, because we don't have enough time to go into this, but something I wanted to leave you with, and this is probably another show for another time. There's another tape circulating out now, not a sex tape, even though we're hearing there's more of those, but there's another tape that started circulating that shows a severe brutality in the jail. Severe. And then there's another case involving the restraint chair, where a man was beaten nearly unconscious, was in intensive care, and the county commission settled it, and the deputies weren't prosecuted. Now we got another tape circulating where no one was prosecuted. Now remember, this DA came after me, met with the feds, everything. Hey, he put a guy in the restraint chair. And we've all seen the video. I've never touched or did anything to anybody. Matter of fact, the guy who's a sheriff now and several other people were the ones that put him in the chair, but they were never charged, never sued. But now we got two cases where a man is beaten almost to death. The county commission settles it, gives him $5 million, and the DA doesn't prosecute. And now we got another tape that is just out of this world. You got to ask yourself, because it's a brutal tape, and you got to ask yourself, if this DA was so interested in protecting inmate civil rights, two questions. Why aren't these people here being prosecuted by her as she came after May? And why weren't the other people, including the guy who's a sheriff now, that actually physically placed him in a chair, why weren't they prosecuted? Why weren't they sued? I think we all know the answer to that.
Yeah, they're all a happy family.
They're all connected. So, you know, I'm the first in the history of the country to ever be charged with brutality, with no physical contact, no injuries, in a situation where a nurse and officers had to check these people every 15 minutes. So you got to ask that. Then here's another question we got to ask. Do not forget, and a lot of people may not remember this because this was 2012, but the DA's office came after me. Because remember, we got a lot of RICO queens in Metro Atlanta and Clayton and Fulton. And I mean, you know, the teachers, oh, this is RICO. Young Thug, this is RICO. Victor Hill, he drove his sheriff's car into town. Oh my God, he stole it 5 times, the same car. This is a RICO case, right? If what we discussed today isn't RICO, what is? So it's time for these RICO queens to come out right now, and they're not doing it. Think about that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I want to leave the viewers with is this: is don't take our word for it. Now, I'm not lying. The sheriff is not lying. So don't take our word for it. Go do your own research and investigation. And if you come up with the same conclusion we have, remember, you have the power to vote to make change.
And there's one thing I need to add to that too. I don't have a lot of details on it, but I was speaking to a guy with some legal expertise, and he said that the citizens do have standing to sue in situations like this when money's being misappropriated, nothing's being done. Now, I don't know a whole lot about that. It's the first I've ever heard about it. But right now, Clayton County needs intervention. It needs an outside agency to come in. And until that happens, maybe that's something the citizens have to think about, because, you know, we're dealing with a lot of, you know, and here's another thing that I want to leave too. You know, we were mandatory reporters, and I'm pretty sure the DA is a mandatory reporter too. I'm pretty sure that the DA is not allowed to be aware of a crime and do nothing about it. And we already got another amended lawsuit filed against her because her friends were abusing kids at the Rainbow House and she did nothing, and against the former chairman who threw it in the trash can. So if she's aware of all of these crimes and doing nothing, that might be another angle we need to be taking care of. There's no way a law enforcement officer is supposed to know of a crime. And I just always say this: if I know that's a drug house and you know it's a drug house and everyone knows it's a drug house, this shouldn't be a drug house because I'm the sheriff. If I know it's a drug house, I'm going to stop it.
And Sheriff, you're talking about another level of incompetence, because she just had an assistant district attorney argue before the Georgia Supreme Court, and 3 cases were just made up by AI. And she went up, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know this, I was aware of that. It's your job to know.
Right. And that's another thing about her and the guy that's a sheriff now is all this claiming to be blind. You know, and the glasses she wear, I know they're good, solid glasses. There's no way you can't see all this stuff.
Right.
So if you're the DA, you've got to check cases that are going before the Supreme Court because it represents you. But you notice they want to put all the blame on the lawyer there. Okay. If you're in leadership and you have knowledge of it, you just as responsible.
You,
Now, it's
the
one thing you
collusion
don't
part.
know, but when you find out, you should take action.
Yeah.
And there's
Mm.
no action that's been taken by her. And the things when you see action being taken care of, because it was exposed another way, like the Rainbow House, and there was no choice. But then you got to look at the effort she did to keep one of her friends out of prison, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother show for another time.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you something else, Sheriff. And I don't know what the particular case was, but I know several times I called on you and I said, "Hey, I've got a difficult situation, and I need you guys to come look into it as an independent agency." And I knew the moment that I asked you, nothing was going to be skewed to my advantage. If we were wrong, or you were going to work it down the line. You did. And I couldn't just say, "Well, I'm going to call my friend Sheriff Hill, and he'll toss
Cover
this
it up.
investigation my way." No, I called you because I wanted the truth brought out, and however it landed is what I was going to have to deal with.
In conclusion, let me say this to all of the sheriffs and chiefs and future sheriffs. Remember this, there's this culture out there in law enforcement where, hey, you got to look out for your people. And I think somehow it got skewed what looking out for your people means. Looking out for your people means, okay, their mother died, and we want to make sure they got enough money to bury her, and make sure the family has money, or you fell on hard times and we take up a collection for you or something like that, or you're in a hospital. Looking out for your people doesn't mean covering up wrong. It doesn't mean they do things they're not supposed to do, and then well, I got to look out for my people, so I'm going to cover it up.
Yeah.
That's the dangerous slippery slope that has us in Clayton County where we're at now. A good commander, as Sun Tzu said, has to be equal with rewards and punishment. He has to
Yes.
be just as quick to
Yep.
reward those he don't like. I mean, reward those he don't like as he is to punish those
Yes.
that he doesn't like. You have to
Yeah.
be equal with rewards and punishment. And when you start covering up for friends, like the DA has done with the Rainbow House and with the scandals of the money that was being funneled from the commission, that's the epitome of how we're at where we're at now in Clayton County, with corruption that I had never seen this level. And I've seen a lot of stuff in my days, but I've never seen anything like this.
No,
Yeah.
neither have I.
Yeah.
I mean, in all the administrations, it's this is just it's like an onion, and the more you peel back, the deeper it goes.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Certainly, you guys brought it. Chief Allen, thank you for coming on the show,
Absolutely.
and your wisdom, and certainly all your years and experience in law enforcement, and especially as an executive lead in leadership, was on full display today. So,
I think
to my brother, thank you once again for all that you do. I appreciate you. And so many of you are liking, subscribing, commenting, and certainly we are appreciative of that. So a lot of you on Hill Nation are doing us a real solid in sharing this. Just continue to keep on doing the good work as we are trying to put out as much of the message as we can about what's going on, particularly in Clayton County, on the live versions of it. And please watch our syndicated shows on Thursday or Saturdays when we have that coming out. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for representing as you always do. And we will see everyone later.